I have seen every episode of The Fresh Prince of Bel-Air several times. And so, of course, I had to check out this modern reimagining that came out on Peacock called simply Bel-Air. Hola, this is Josue from RetroSick. And first of all, I just want to say thanks for the 700 subscribers that I got on here. I've been doing videos like this for about a year now, so 700 is quite the milestone. So again, thank you. So for this video, I'll be pointing out all the little things I've noticed from Bel-Air that was referenced or changed from the classic 90s sitcom, The Fresh Prince of Bel-Air. First things first, on episode 1, we see Will on a throne, which is a callback to The Fresh Prince of Bel-Air's opening theme sequence. As the comedy went immediately to Will moving to Bel-Air, the drama shows us what Will's life was like while he lived in West Philadelphia, already going in the right direction of what a drama series should be doing, telling us all the necessary details of a character and how their past affects their present. We can see right off the bat that this is modern day times, not the 90s, just by the reference to the Meek Mill song Dreams and Nightmares, which is the name of the pilot episode of Bel-Air, by the way. Along with that, we see the dynamic between Will and his friend here, which I found out later is the friend he brought to Bel-Air in the one episode played by Don Cheadle in the 90s. I'll get back to that later. Also, we get a real life look at the bullies he was dealing with in the hood, and the conflict at home quickly becomes apparent. Promising athlete and all-around good kid Will has to choose a future in college ball over present time respect in his neighborhood. Will tries to do both and challenges the neighborhood street dealers to a match on the court where he wins. And this is where we finally see what actually happened with that one little fight situation. It literally starts with the salty street dude getting hit with a basketball, which was pretty funny at first, but turns out it was actually pretty serious. Guns were involved. Will ends up in a holding cell, gets bailed out, and his mom is convinced Will's life is in danger. And maybe it is. The guy he got in a fight with is well known on the streets apparently, because Viola, aka Vi, calls him by his first and last name, like him and Will used to be buddies or something. This is the scene where she tells him he's got to go to Bel-Air with his well-off family members to stay out of trouble for a while. 15 minutes in, and the whole premise to The Fresh Prince of Bel-Air is set. I couldn't imagine the intro to Bel-Air being much better than what we just saw. The next scene, we see Will riding through California hills by none other than the Jazz character from Fresh Prince. Instead of some taxi driver, they introduced Jazz here as a Cali guy with his own rideshare service. Jazz in the drama is painted less like the comic relief partner and more of a cool entrepreneur type friend of Will, the one dude he can relate to as he moves into California. Another scene that makes this show great is the view Will and Jazz take overlooking Los Angeles, because it comes full circle at the end of the season. The Banks' mansion is way more elaborate than that B-roll mansion they used in the sitcom. This looks like an actual mansion. So just like in the sitcom, Jeffrey is the first to meet Will and brings him in the door. But this Jeffrey ain't a butler. He's the guy who hires the butlers after giving them a thorough background check. Probably the funniest callback to the sitcom is when Will literally says,
"Got in one little fight, my mom got scared."
Aunt Vivian welcomes him and low-key tries to get him to hide in his room while they have guests over. But Will is way too extroverted for that. As we see Hillary for the first time, it looks like she's building a food service catering thing, but it looks more like she's doing the media influencer thing. Again, giving Hillary more of a modern role. The 90s Hillary would have fit right in with the influencer thing. But social media didn't exist, so Hillary had a hard time finding her calling. She went from no job, living off her parents, to having a catering service, to TV weather girl. She really had to get out there and figure it out.
God, everyone's got something to do but me. Maybe I should get a job.
The modern Hillary knows immediately that her calling involves content creating and food, and this brings up its own complications later on. She mentions that she moved to the pool house. The pool house was mentioned a lot over the sitcom, and it wasn't until Will and Carlton actually moved into the pool house till we really saw what it looked like. The big, elegant house party the Banks have looks way more extravagant than it did on the sitcom. Of course, they were on a soundstage back then. This time it actually filters outside, so it's like a garden party. They get some culture clashing with Will as he greets his Uncle Phil and his political friends, including Judge Robertson, the same character from the sitcom that Sherman Hemsley hilariously played. Phil still has that trademark beard with a bald head hairstyle. He's not a judge yet though. That'll probably be something he grows into in a later season. However, it's Phil's other friend, Fred, who ends up running against him in the campaign. More on that later. Little cousin Ashley finally makes her appearance, and she's just like Tatiana Ali's Ashley of the sitcom. Innocent, makes good grades, and looks up to her big cousin Will, but her role in the drama is minimal, which is fine because there's still a lot of other characters to develop and she's still just a kid, so there's not too much to tell right now. But just like in the sitcom, I expect Ashley will get a bigger role in the later seasons as she gets older and that teenage drama sets in. Now, one major difference between the drama and the sitcom is when Lisa pops up at the garden party. Here she is the daughter of Uncle Phil's friend Fred. This is the same Lisa Will ends up almost marrying in the sitcom, but he didn't even meet her till season 5. Guess they wanted to hurry up and give him a love interest. Or maybe they just wanted to hurry up and start some drama, because apparently this Lisa is the ex-girlfriend of Carlton Banks, who actually shows up right when she starts talking to Will. Because of this, Carlton immediately has an attitude towards Will, which will last for the majority of the season. This Carlton is vastly different from the sitcom Carlton, in that he's not a funny nerd who happens to be kinda jealous of Will. He's an insecure athlete who is definitely jealous of Will. Will and Uncle Phil don't get along at first because they don't understand each other, and Will thinks he's being used for politics. But as he tries to run away, Phil proves how much he actually cares about him. His friend from West Philly, Trey, is stuck in the aftermath of the gang shooting attempt. Now they show his name in the first episode, but you don't really notice till that episode when Will brings Trey to Bel-Air that this Trey character is Ice Trey from the sitcom, who is played by Don Cheadle. Later on, Will starts Bel-Air Academy, and everyone's real athletic. Carlton's doing lacrosse, and Will somehow sees Lisa from far away dressed in swim gear. Carlton is caught snorting what he claims to be Xanax, like he's done it 100 times, making me to believe that this is a foreshadowing of a worsening drug habit, especially since he does it again at a party later on, where Will is hanging out with his ex. There was only one episode from the sitcom where Carlton was taking drugs, and that was completely by accident. He was stressed out and tired and took a pill thinking it was caffeine or something like that. In the drama, Carlton is just snorting his drugs at a party.
And let me do my drugs in peace, dude.
It's not even his house. But this time he gets all upset and pushes Will into the pool, where he flails around in slow motion like Sonic the Hedgehog underwater. Apparently he can't swim. Luckily, Lisa is a swimmer, so she pulls him up, and Carlton gaslights him like he jumped in the pool and almost drowned himself for attention. Will then walks up to Carlton, smacks him in the face, and walks back to Lisa. Not really. He actually tries to hold back because it's his cousin, but proceeds to kick Carlton's ass anyway. None of this happens in the 90s sitcom. This is purely for dramatic purposes, clearly. In episode 2, Aunt Viv finds out about Will's smackdown as it gets recorded on everyone's phone, and Uncle Phil starts thinking Will won't fit in and might hurt his campaign for DA. But Viv is like, this is our campaign, we're in this together, showing signs that the campaign might drive their marriage apart like it did in the sitcom. They have their family breakfast moments at the table, reminiscent of that kitchen table from the sitcom. They got their Bel-Air Academy uniforms on, and it's very similar to how they looked in the sitcom. They start talking about Hillary's cooking and how she's trying to start a catering business while starting a cooking show on her social media. It was at this point where I fully realized Hillary had a much bigger role in Bel-Air than the sitcom, and she's taken a lot more seriously by the writers. She's not just a black dumb blonde who needs to ask Uncle Phil for money so she can go shopping. This Hillary is building her own business and has that mindset from the beginning. Will and Carlton literally got into a fight the night before and have to be reminded to get along. And Carlton still has an attitude. On the sitcom, Will and Carlton were more playful. They would tease each other, but they got along.
Don't make me come down there.
Bel-Air's Aunt Viv is well fleshed out. She's very thoughtful and does everything she can to make Will comfortable, reminding him and us that she used to be that chick from Philly, but she had to adapt to this Bel-Air lifestyle without changing who she is, and Will can too. Will gets to his first day of school, and even though he doesn't immediately turn his uniform inside out, like in the sitcom, he still manages to show his individuality by wearing his hat to the side. Probably the most Carlton-like thing Bel-Air's Carlton does so far is make a speech as class president and kind of flex on Will that this is his world. In the academy, Carlton's the popular one. In a radio interview, Uncle Phil volunteers the information that he grew up on a farm in North Carolina, something that he tried to hide in the episode of The Fresh Prince, cause he was ashamed.
Mama, I'm not ashamed.
The Academy's basketball coach is way more competent a coach than he was in the sitcom.
Sorry I'm late, Coach.
Hey, don't worry about it, Smith. You just take it easy. Save that energy for the game.
Will comes up to him, interested in joining the team, and the coach, knowing he's a good player, is skeptical of letting him in because somehow he saw the video of him getting in that fight with Carlton. But he tells Will to come back later to try out for it like everybody else. So Hillary, looking very throwback Hillary in this scene with her outfit, is at a crossroads now with how she wants to run her cooking business. She tries out for a high-profile food platform where she can serve and showcase her food, and they tell her to tone it down, wear more neutral colors, and don't make the food so spicy. This brought me back to that catering episode specifically where Hillary tried to tone it down while providing good service, all to prove that she can hold down a job that she liked. Will naturally makes a new, unproblematic basketball friend in class, and this reminded me of the friend Will made on the sitcom in a similar situation.
First name, Kellogg.
Listen, Cornflake.
In Bel-Air, he's just Tyler. Bel-Air's Carlton, once again thinking he has an environmental advantage or something, while being on campus, tries to start another fight with Will, like an asshole. But Will is too smart for that. He just walks away. On the sitcom, Jeffrey and Phil eventually proved to be more than just a butler and his boss. They were friends. It's made more obvious sooner in the drama. Jeffrey is someone Phil can bounce ideas off of and listen to hip-hop with over some whiskey. Also, like in the sitcom, Phil gets on Will's level to give him advice while showing he's not just a bougie politician. Their budding relationship, of course, is making Carlton insecure. And he also feels some kind of way in the sitcom about it. But Uncle Phil eventually has to sit him down and explain that Will didn't have a father figure, that Carlton has had a dad his entire life, and that he should stop being a jealous jackass and learn to share the attention. Something Bel-Air's Lisa kind of tells him too, but he ain't listening. Hillary uses her own platform to tell her fans, her Hillaristas, that she's going to turn down the job so she can keep it real with her style. Will makes the basketball team and lets Carlton's hating ass know that he's coming for his throne as cool kid on campus. But then Carlton's friend sets him up with drugs, and that's just taking it too far. This is Will's first week. Will, showing his cultured side, draws some pretty good pencil art in detention, and the teacher mocks him by tossing it in a trash can like it was a basketball. I believe the 90s Will would draw a little bit too early in the show. With Will being in trouble at school, Aunt Viv and Uncle Phil come by in his defense. And just like in the sitcom, when Will wrongfully gets put in a jail cell, Vivian and Philip call out the negligence of those in charge, pointing out that they can't lawfully keep him detained. In the scene with Lisa, Will gets mustard on his uniform and proceeds to turn it inside out. They actually did this better than the sitcom by giving Will a reason to do it, outside of just wanting to be an individual among a sea of uniforms. We see Bel-Air's Jeffrey and Phil playing pool together. They got all of Uncle Phil's background and passions right on the show here. He seems to be more down to earth, right from the get-go. It's easier to tell that before being a politician, he's a sports guy who was in a fraternity and grew up in a small town called Yamacraw. They didn't mention the pig he had growing up though.
I hope he mentions his pig.
Vivian's character in Bel-Air feels a lot more supportive of her family. She wants to keep them happy and really hold them down even when they're being disrespectful. When Will's mom kind of chews her out for letting him get in another fight, she tries harder to keep Will out of trouble. She organizes this networking lunch thing for Hillary, but Hillary doesn't want her help, because she thinks Vivian will just lead her back to the types of employers who want to control how she cooks and how she looks. It's not that Aunt Viv wasn't supportive on the sitcom, but sitcom Viv was a little more independent-minded. They showed how she created a Black History course as an instructor, and her attempts to make a comeback as a dancer and artist was more in the forefront. Being how Bel-Air is really good at fleshing out Phil's character, they show him kind of struggle to reconnect with his frat brothers, unfairly, because he's a Bel-Air guy now. But Will helps him out and gives Phil a chance to show that he remembers the whole step routine and he's still that same frat guy. Will was there for Phil just like Phil was there for Will, and Carlton's hating it. After her efforts for Hillary kind of blow up in her face, Vivian's friend tries to refocus her energy on her paintings. The sitcom never showed Vivian with her own support group outside the family. Again, she was the strong, independent type, and if she wanted to do something, she just did it. In Bel-Air, Vivian has to hold herself back a lot, especially with Hillary. They both have a passion for the arts, and Hill keeps trying Vivian like she just gave that passion up. She just decided to put her family first, but Hillary doesn't get it. Jeffrey shows up out of nowhere and reminded me that he doesn't have that big of a role yet. It's actually kind of shady. We don't see him cleaning anything, he really gives more of a head of security type of vibe. In the sitcom, he shows up in every episode cracking jokes in that British accent. It was like he was actually a part of the family. Instead of being on the same basketball team as Will, the writers for Bel-Air made Carlton play a different sport, I guess to add to the conflict. Everyone watches Will's game while Carlton does terrible with his lacrosse game, and coach tells him to get the hell off the field. After an angry snort of drugs, he walks on the basketball court to witness Will make the final shot and win the game. A moment where, if he was on that team, he would have did what Carlton did on the sitcom and steal the ball, trying to get the winning shot himself. The episode ends with the bully from West Philly somehow seeing news of the win in real time. Him and his boys must be really big sport fans to be following a random high school basketball game on the other side of the country. Maybe they're just looking for promising basketball players, and their street life is just one big front for their professional career as talent scouts. Bel-Air makes the gang members unrealistically determined to find Will. They already shot at his friend Ice Tray. On the 90s sitcom, you could safely assume that those guys from Philly couldn't care less if Will moved to California. If anything, it was like, as long as they don't see Will in the hood, he's fine. But when Will eventually did go back to Philly to visit, the dude he got in trouble with didn't even remember him. We finally start seeing Carlton in a better light 4 episodes in, as he plays chess with Philip, and we see better how their relationship is. It's like a playful, intellectual, accountability father and son thing. Will tells Jeffrey about how the West Philly dude, Rashad Denton, is still looking for him, and he knows he's in Bel-Air. But Jeffrey already knows about Rashad, and he tells Will that he'll handle it. This Jeffrey, as shady as he is once again looking less like a butler and more like a bodyguard. More like he's got people in the streets watching him and the family's back, and he'll do whatever's necessary. Undercover private investigator with a gun type of guy. Vivian's friend tells her about an art gallery coming up that rediscovers artists. While on the subject of undiscovered talent, Will is on the next scene showcasing his piano playing skills, and Hillary's applying to content creator houses and apartments, thinking people don't see her potential. But she and Jazz meet, and in contrast to the 90s sitcom, it's clear that Hillary is actually feeling Jazz as much as he is Hillary. She goes out of her way to help him start an Instagram account and even follows him. Meanwhile, Ashley Banks is slipping away to do her own thing. This is the second or third time they show Ashley texting someone in a group chat. It seems to be just for some innocent hanging out with friends, but I wouldn't be surprised if this evolved into something more problematic later on. Turns out the shady head of security vibes you get with Jeffrey are true, as apparently he was paying Rashad Denton to leave Will alone. But now that he wants more money, Rashad ends up dead at a strip club. But still, the Banks family is still his top priority, so he'll do whatever he can to make Ashley more comfortable at a campaign skate party by inviting her friends that not even her parents know about yet. Episode 5. This episode is based a lot on the 90s episode where Aunt Viv allows Will to bring his friend Ice Tray to Bel-Air so he won't feel homesick. Just like in the sitcom, he's amazed at all the little upscale things Will has now, but at the same time feels out of place. But this time, Hillary doesn't blindly fall in love with him. As far as she cares to know, Trey is just Will's +1 to a dinner she organized. This new subplot of Aunt Viv rediscovering her artistic side and focusing on herself reaches a new level when the guy who owns the gallery immediately starts acting like him and Viv are on a date. which will obviously become a problem later on. Politically, Phil on the sitcom always seemed that while living in a right-wing leaning part of California, he was a left-leaning judge. He decided to take a defund the police stance during his campaign. While it was recommended of him to run a centrist moderate campaign, he wanted to take a side and increase the chance of actually winning. So now he's made enemies with his former friend, Fred, who happens to be the chief of police. Again, this is Lisa's dad, and Will has PTSD from his run-in with the cops back in Philly. So the drama is really stacking up here in episode 5. Bel-Air has taken an interesting route with Ashley, as we see the foreshadowing of her getting advice on the different types of sexuality during the dinner, and she ends up asking Hillary on advice about a girl she might like. Phil is helping Will and Trey have a good time with all the rich LA benefits, but Trey is expecting Will to leave it all to come back to Philadelphia with him. He's really just being a bad friend and killing the vibe. How do you get mad at your friend because they came up in life? Carlton uses Trey as a distraction to keep Will away while he tries to push up on Lisa, but of course, she still sees him as an ex, and it's exactly what he deserves. The conflict between Ice Tray and Will is way more authentic. They literally become incompatible because of his move to Bel-Air and the trauma they both went through after that night in Philly. And it hits pretty hard because Trey was that day one friend from home that Will had. Similar to the sitcom, his mom Vi has to come to terms that Will wants to stay in LA. In the drama, you see that it's probably for the best, since Trey is convinced that Will is a sellout, trashing him on Instagram. But in classic Uncle Phil fashion, Phil levels with Will, who's clearly upset about the whole thing, and tells him that he and Aunt Viv had to deal with the same thing. Hillary decided to go full-time content creator with her cooking, and soon gets pressured about not being repetitive, but yet needing to be posting something every day by her social media consultant boss guy. This discount Jared Padalecki makes a corny joke about loving that show Family Matters and how they should remake it. Lisa is dealing with her own problem with the memory of her mother dying of lupus, and so they do this annual lupus awareness event. The issue is that not only has Lisa's father already moved on with another woman, her new stepmother, but this stepmother is already pregnant by her father. Now, Lisa's father has changed a lot from the sitcom. The sitcom Fred, played by John Amos, that Will met with, only because he was dating Lisa, was not a police chief. Just a regular blue-collar dad. And on the sitcom, I believe the mother of Lisa had also died, but this Fred was not the type of father to just move on and remarry 2 months after his wife died. He was the type to wait a little longer and remarry at the end of the season. In the season 5 finale, he and Will's mom fall in love, and it's implied that they actually get married later on.
I know it's late, but I really need to talk.
Ashley finds out her friend has a crush on Will, which happened in the sitcom too, but this time it's a problem, because the modern day Ashley has a crush on her friend. Another modern day thing they've added to these characters is Carlton's problem with anxiety, and Hillary's option to make hotter content for more views and follows. Looking back on 90s Hillary and her job with the TV station, it's very outdated. Nobody's worried about what you look like while giving the weather on the local news anymore. But this social media thing she's doing now is a perfect mix of her character's interest in the food and entertainment industry. Lisa and Will are being encouraged by Fred and Phil, respectively, to tone it down and stop getting so close to each other, which only makes Lisa and Will get even closer. Carlton finally apologizes to Will after finding out that he is not his enemy, and Hillary finds a gimmick when it comes to her cooking content, but she also finds herself in a management deal she doesn't like. The campaign that Phil gets busy with does find a way to drive a wedge between him and Vivian's marriage, like it does in the sitcom. But Vivian uses her extra time alone to focus on her art career, which gives the rich art gallery owner, Reed, more time to focus on her. Now, Philip has already had his eye on this guy, and he tells Jeffrey to do an investigation on him. And Jeffrey's like, oh yeah, he could be a problem. So when Vivian goes on one of his weekend art events, Phil cancels his meetings and attends the event with her, which was sweet at first, but then she finds out he's only there to be her chaperone. Phil and Viv actually get a chance to sit down and talk about it, which was actually really refreshing to see. It's clear that Phil loves his wife, but they kind of end up arguing about how he doesn't care about her growing as an artist. Only because he just doesn't get it, I guess. He's like, I make enough money for the both of us. What do you need a career for? Vivian is determined to make this work now after putting her career on hold for 15 years. This art comeback is pretty much a parallel to Vivian Banks taking that dance class to prove she could be a dancer again. Episode 8 opens with Uncle Phil playing golf with Carlton, something the 90s Uncle Phil was seen doing plenty of times. You could say golf was probably his favorite sport. Bel-Air's Uncle Phil makes it more clear that he likes all the sports, with no particular favorite. They fly Aunt Vi out to visit, like she did every now and then on the sitcom. Will and Lisa are now seriously dating each other, but it's low-key. We see the competitiveness between Vi and Vivian, kind of like we do in the sitcom, but in the drama it's more serious. There's some actual tension that stems from their history and how different their lives turned out. Phil is trying to do damage control over how his family looks during the campaign, and his kids aren't having it. Hillary is putting her foot down with her business decision of the thirst-trapping online chef. And while Vivian is trying to make an art submission deadline, she tells Phil about Vi wanting to tell the truth about Will's father. The truth being that he's out there and wants to see Will. Vi is in LA for Will's 17th birthday, and after hearing about Vi's plans to catch Will up on that alleged deadbeat father of his, Lou, Phil wants to keep Lou away entirely. Phil is very much aware of the kind of guy Lou is, and is convinced he'd only bring drama to Will's life and derail his progress without him. He gets his guy Jeffrey to find him and make sure he doesn't get too close. This is another example of Uncle Phil being very protective of his family, maybe even overly protective. He can't keep an eye on everybody though, as he still has no idea of Ashley's whereabouts and her interest in girls, or Carlton being hooked on Xannies. But he seems to have an unbalanced level of protection for Will and Vivian. This is a bit more extreme than it was on the 90s sitcom. He was protective when he needed to be, but it had to be really obvious that he needed to be there. His focus was usually his career and then keeping Vivian happy, followed by the needs of the kids. For Bel-Air's Vivian, it seemed Phil's protective instinct kicked in for her at just the right time, and Vivian became the focus over his career. With Will, it's like Phil is making up for the fact that Will has no father figure, and as Carlton has been feeling left out about it, Phil explained that Will needs a little more love and positive reinforcement, which leads him to believe that keeping the missing father out of his life is the best call. Now Jeffrey, as politely as he can, is curious to why Phil has to make the call on whether Will's father can be around him or not. He usually has no problem with following orders, but this one actually hits close to home for Jeff. For he's a father too, and his circumstances are such that he can't see his son whenever he wants. To keep another man from a son he wants to see doesn't sit right with him, even if he doesn't know Lou from Kung Fu. If you recall, Jeffrey had a son on the sitcom who he couldn't see because he was raised in Britain while Jeff worked in America. The son came down to scam Jeffrey and the family out of money he thought was owed to him, but that wasn't until season 6. Vi is the only one who's really come to an understanding that Lisa is Will's girlfriend at this point. But at the birthday gift opening, things get heated once again between Vi and Vivian. Now it stems down to them not understanding each other and more jealousy. Carlton comes by to talk to his mom and calm her down, trying to shed some light on Vi's perspective so Vivian can understand her better, because he too knows a thing or two about feeling jealous of a family member. And he actually pushes for her to talk it out, because they're family, just like Viv pushed for Carlton to work it out with Will. The drama series is expanding on these characters so well. It really gives us a better understanding of them as human beings and not just characters on a TV show. So in light of Aunt Viv and Aunt Vi talking it out, Carlton talks it out with Will and addresses exactly why he's had an attitude since the first episode. Will catches Jeffrey being shady and goes ahead and asks him to look up his father, literally the opposite of what Uncle Phil asked him to do. So being that he works for both of them, he's between a rock and a hard place. We know what he wants to do as a father who can't see his son, and we see how he receives the actual gratitude from Will, almost like he's surprised by it. Phil doesn't give Jeffrey that gratitude, but he's the guy signing his checks. The next episode shows the Banks going to Sunday church service. Even though it's for their political image, you can tell it isn't their first time going to one. They tease that Carlton has this great singing voice and he's in the choir. It's been a while since he sang though. From that one church episode in Fresh Prince of Bel-Air, we saw that Carlton is also in the choir, but it was a whole comedy. Him and his sister were trying out for the lead singer. Hillary is getting out of a bad contract deal with her content creation house, and Jazz helps move her stuff out. Instead of throwing him out the house, she does literally the opposite and invites him to a hotel she's staying at. We get a surprise when Vivian goes to a meeting to pitch her artwork for some kind of fellowship, and we see none other than the women who played characters on the 90s sitcom, Aunt Vi and Aunt Vivian. This was the Aunt Viv who replaced Janet Hubert in season 4 after some behind-the-scenes drama, but they've all since made amends during the 30-year reunion of the show. It was great to see Bel-Air find a way to include some of the original actors, and you gotta love that art piece of the original Uncle Phil. Very touching, in the most subtle way. Will makes the decision to not move forward with finding his dad, as Phil has been all the dad he needed lately. Fred realizes that Lisa's gotten serious with Will, and he's using information that Judge Robinson told him to say Will's just a thug and Phil is just letting him circumvent justice. Judge Robinson has a pretty small role, even though his character ran against Phil for judge on the sitcom, but as an acquaintance of both Phil and Fred, it seems he was willing to help both of them. Phil finds out Jeffrey helped Will behind his back, and Jeff goes on a leave of absence, but not without respectfully roasting Phil. Aunt Viv wonders if she should proceed in this art position because she could get too busy and Phil could get too busy as DA. Also, their house manager just went on a leave, so she's like, who's gonna hold the house down? Phil encourages her to keep going and he'll take up any slack. I don't think Phil really knows just how out of whack the people in the house are. Again, he has an unbalanced sense of knowing what's going on around him, a lot like the Uncle Phil in the sitcom. During debate night with Fred, Judge Robinson shows Phil whose side he's really on, not Phil's. He's finally aligning more with his cold-hearted 90s counterpart. Lisa confronts Will about all that Philadelphia trouble, and this lets him and Carlton know that Lisa's dad Fred knows and will surely bring it up in a debate. And we can thank old Carl Robinson for that. This is the second time the term family matter is mentioned.
It's a family matter.
I think the writers might be daring someone to remake Family Matters, but despite all this, Phil again shows his strength and composure by moving forward. Maybe he's so cool about it because he knows some dirt about Fred. But in the debate scene, Phil decides to withdraw from the race, and he does it for the family. Seems like the whole time, ever since Jeffrey left, he knew that this was what he had to do. In the sitcom, Phil wins against the clownish Judge Robinson by default. Of course, then he still had Jeffrey, and Vivian wasn't pursuing a career. She was just pregnant. But much later on in the sitcom, when Phil tries to advance his political career even further, it starts to really affect him and Vivian, to the point where she wants to separate from all of it. And he ends up having to make a compromise for her. So the Bel-Air drama has made a huge plot change from the sitcom. It really shows us what would have happened if he let Vivian pursue her dream and dialed back his own political goals. With Vivian's art fellowship now the focus, everyone attends a classy event in her honor. Phil and Vivian's real friends come out, and Will tells Lisa, who's still upset with him, that he loves her. And Will, as sharp as he is, figured out that Jazz and Hillary's been sleeping together, while she's been trying to hide it from everyone. Phil is around more for Carlton, which puts a pep in his step, but the kids are figuring out that Phil might have fired Jeffrey. Now Lou just happens to be waiting outside the gate of the house and sneaks in as Will leaves. While Phil and Carlton are just about to leave for some bonding, he just pulls up on them, saying he hopped on a plane soon as Jeffrey told him how bad Will wanted to see him. He doesn't remember his name is Jeffrey though.
And then your man Jeremy. Jeffrey. Whatever his damn name is.
Phil and Lou proceed to not get along. Now anyone who's watched Fresh Prince of Bel-Air remembers that episode where Will's father Lou came back to spend time with him and then gonna try to leave without saying bye. And Phil knew he was the type of guy to do that, but was willing to give him a chance because Will really wanted to see him. Jeffrey had nothing to do with Lou on the sitcom. It was all Uncle Phil trying to do a big favor for Will. It's very similar to the memorable episode of Fresh Prince, but flushed out a lot better. This reunion with Lou has been foreshadowed since like episode 7. So Lou showing up out of nowhere really messes up everyone's plans, and Phil tells him to leave and come back later. Carlton breaks the news that Lou showed up and recommends he go ahead and read that report he's been avoiding since Jeffrey brought up the paperwork. The report says he got arrested and put in prison, so he couldn't be in Will's life even if he wanted. So Will is willing to side with him on an understanding. But Phil knows Lou's character more than Will and was even his lawyer back in the day. Phil says he's an unpredictable con artist. Definitely the type of dude you should just block. But in the end, Vivian and Phil leave it up to Will on what he wants to do. Of course, hearing his mom kind of come clean that they hid the truth when he was 4 years old, he decides that he wants an explanation from Lou, something from Lou's perspective. So like in the sitcom, Will and his dad spend some time getting along and reminiscing on the few things Will actually remembered. But things get real quick when they get into how Lou feels about Phil, Vivian, and Will's mom. Now, instead of Lou getting the last laugh and walking out, which is always hard to watch, the writers gave Will some really good dialogue to tell him off with. And of course, the delivery couldn't have been better. It's like someone spent the past few decades wondering what Will would do if he had a chance to tell his dad to go to hell straight to his face. It was pretty satisfying. But on both the sitcom and the drama, Will had an emotional time regarding his father. This time, Will feels like everyone was lying and being fake with him, so he decides to pack a bag and run away. The family try to figure out where he went while the kids start to confront Phil about what happened to Jeffrey. Will ends up meeting Jazz outside the city, at pretty much the same place where they overlooked the city in the first episode. The season comes full circle here as Will kinda spills his feelings and tells Jazz that the LA life ended up changing him for the worse, just like Jazz warned him about in the first episode. Will kind of brings back that heartbreaking line from the sitcom where he was angrily crying about his dad leaving, this time talking about everybody. It's like they don't want me. Jazz, being the best friend Will has, reminds him that the family truly loves him, and he's in control of his own life and has to be a man about how he handles everything. It ends on a hopeful note, leaving us to wonder, while they overlook the city, is Will going to give this place another chance? It's an amazing end to the season, if you ask me. So yeah, that's my take on the whole Bel-Air reboot. I was impressed by how well it was shaped into a modern day drama. I haven't been a big fan of reboots over the past decade, but Bel-Air could be a prime example of how to do it the right way. And after everyone sees how well this worked with The Fresh Prince of Bel-Air, maybe we'll see more reboots like this in the near future. So if you like all things nostalgia and interesting coincidences surrounding said nostalgia, like and subscribe to Retro Sick for more of the content. Let's go.